join us on Patreon, and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
The history of Native Americans is deeply interwoven with the story of African-descended peoples in North America, forming a rich tapestry of resilience, survival, and complex interrelationships. Yet, within mainstream historical narratives, the experiences of Black natives, individuals of both African and Native American heritage, are often marginalized or overlooked. Their stories are critical to understanding the multifaceted consequences of U.S. policies designed to assimilate indigenous populations, particularly the DAWES Act of 1887. This legislation, intended to integrate Native Americans into Euro-American society by allotting communal lands to individual households, wrought profound disruption on Native communities. For Black natives, the DAWES Act carried an even more convoluted legacy, as it intersected with prevailing racial ideologies, colonial land greed, and social hierarchies that sought to erase their identities and disenfranchise them. Before the enactment of the DAWES Act, many African Americans and Native Americans had formed familial and cultural bonds, especially within the 5 civilized tribes, the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole nations. These tribes, primarily located in the southeastern United States, had incorporated people of African descent into their societies in various capacities, as freedmen, slaves, and kin. The Seminole, in particular, forged strong alliances with Black communities, offering sanctuary to escaped slaves and integrating them into their social fabric. These complex relationships were further complicated by the systemic pressures of colonization, enslavement, and forced removals, culminating in the Trail of Tears. As these tribes were forcibly relocated to Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma, African-descended individuals moved with them, continuing to shape the demographic and cultural landscapes of these communities. The DAWES Act, officially known as the General Allotment Act of 1887, was a pivotal policy in the United States' broader strategy of indigenous assimilation. By breaking up communal lands and allocating parcels to individual Native families, the act aimed to dissolve tribal sovereignty and erode indigenous cultural practices. The surplus land, often sold to white settlers and corporations, accelerated the dispossession of Native lands and wealth. For Black natives, this policy presented a labyrinth of challenges. Many were classified as freedmen in tribal roles, a categorization that often excluded them from full tribal citizenship and the accompanying land allotments. The complex process of enrollment on the DAWES rolls divided Native communities along racial lines, institutionalizing discrimination and erasing the identities of Black natives who were both culturally and genealogically tied to their tribes. In the Cherokee Nation, the divide between Cherokee by blood and Cherokee freedmen became a contentious issue. The DAWES rolls categorized individuals as either by blood or as freedmen, a distinction that had profound implications for land ownership and citizenship rights. Black natives who had been integral members of Cherokee society found themselves relegated to a second-class status, stripped of claims to land and political representation. This racial stratification was not merely a bureaucratic oversight, but a calculated move that aligned with the broader racial dynamics of the post-Reconstruction South, where white supremacy sought to disenfranchise both Black and Native peoples. The Seminole Nation presents a particularly illuminating case of the DAWES Act's impact on Black natives. The Seminole had a long-standing tradition of intermarriage and alliance with African-descended peoples, especially the Black Seminoles who had fought alongside them during the Seminole Wars. Yet, under the DAWES Act, Black Seminoles were often categorized as freedmen, thus severing their claims to Seminole identity and land rights. This exclusion was a stark betrayal of their historical alliances and contributions to the Seminole struggle against U.S. encroachment. The Dawes Commission's rigid racial classifications ignored the fluid and inclusive nature of Seminole identity, imposing a binary that marginalized Black Seminoles and denied them their rightful place within nation. Moreover, the economic ramifications of the Dawes Act for Black natives were devastating. Land allotments were often insufficient, poorly located, or swiftly lost due to predatory practices by white speculators and government-sanctioned policies. Many Black natives, already navigating the dual oppressions of anti-Black racism and anti-Indigenous prejudice, were particularly vulnerable to dispossession. Without the legal and social protections afforded to full tribal citizens, they faced immense barriers to maintaining land ownership, resulting in widespread poverty and social marginalization. This economic disenfranchisement had long-lasting effects, contributing to cycles of poverty that persisted for generations. The psychological impact of the DAWES Act on Black natives cannot be overstated. The forced racial categorization fractured communal bonds and sowed distrust within native societies. Families were torn apart by bureaucratic designations that did not reflect their lived realities. The erasure of Black natives from tribal narratives fostered a sense of alienation and historical amnesia, obscuring the vital roles they played in shaping Indigenous histories and cultures. This erasure extended beyond land rights, permeating cultural practices, language preservation, and political participation. Resistance to these injustices emerged in various forms. Black natives and their allies fought legal battles to reclaim their rights and assert their identities. The Cherokee freedmen, for instance, engaged in prolonged legal struggles to gain recognition as full citizens of the Cherokee Nation. These efforts culminated in significant legal victories in the 21st century, reaffirming the citizenship rights of Cherokee freedmen and challenging the entrenched racial hierarchies within the tribe. However, these victories were hard-won and reflective of a broader struggle for recognition and justice that continues to this day. The legacy of the DAWES Act persists in contemporary Native politics and identity discourse. The question of who belongs to a tribe remains fraught, often influenced by the historical classifications imposed by the DAWES rules. For Black natives, reclaiming their heritage involves navigating both external prejudice and internal community divisions. This struggle for recognition is not merely about legal status, but about affirming the interconnected histories of African and Native American peoples and honoring the resilience of those who endured systemic erasure. In examining the impact of the DAWES Act on Black natives, it becomes evident that this policy was not just a tool of Indigenous dispossession, but also a mechanism of racial stratification and identity suppression. The experiences of Black natives reveal the insidious ways in which colonial policies exploited and deepened existing social fissures, reinforcing hierarchies that persist in various forms today. Understanding this history is crucial for fostering a more inclusive narrative that acknowledges the full spectrum of Native American experiences and the indelible contributions of Black natives to Indigenous resilience and cultural survival. The story of Black natives in the DAWES Act is one of loss, resilience, and ongoing resistance. It is a testament to the enduring strength of communities that, despite facing systemic efforts to erase their identities, continue to fight for recognition, justice, and self-determination. As contemporary movements for Indigenous and racial justice gain momentum, revisiting and amplifying these histories becomes not just an academic exercise but a moral imperative, an essential step toward healing historical wounds and building a more equitable future for all.